Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning and really appreciate the time together with everyone. I'm seeing everybody load in as participants, so really appreciate the time that you're dedicating with Dee Dee and I this morning and to your own learning that impacts your team. It's really a pleasure to join you. Today, again, we started off a quick series started last week. Dee Dee and I will also be with you again on Wednesday afternoon with one of our colleagues, Sergio Mendoza, who also is an executive leader and a leader coach now with Studer Education. Dee Dee, it's always a pleasure to see you. I know that you're on site with a partner. I hope your weekend was great and really looking forward to spending the time together.
Thanks, Pat. Always great to be here with you and to share this time.
So, and we spent a little bit of time in a quick introduction last time, but Dee Dee, just give some highlights about you as we're starting for somebody who may be new to hearing your story and the work that you're doing.
I am a retired repurposed superintendent from Kentucky. I had the pleasure of working with Studer Ed as a partner, and I fell in love with the work so much that I joined Studer 4 years ago. So it's a great journey to get to learn so much about partners across the United States.
And I'm always honored to work alongside Dee Dee. I also am a colleague within Studer Education, served as a superintendent and in public education for 38 years. I'm located in the Metro Milwaukee area, but we also serve partners all over the country. So as we think about the topic today and really appreciate the time that you're committing to your learning, encourage you to pop some questions into the chat. We'll also have a follow-up feedback loop so that your questions can guide part of the conversation on Wednesday that we'll be having also. Today, we're really talking about leading for impact as you're growing leadership within your teams and growing leaders at every level within your teams. How do you actually build the conditions for a great place to work and a great place to learn? When we think about our work as a team, we're really trying to build that deep sense of purpose, making sure that everyone in the organization sees that line of sight to their contributions make a difference, and build that strength of leadership within teams, cross teams, accelerate results, and really build that place where children want to learn and team members want to work. So as we work today, we're really going to be talking about how do you actually create that level of alignment to what's most important to improve? How do you identify the measures that will matter most? And when we think about that, we all across different states have different accountability measures. We're really going to be talking about improvement measures, the small things that you need to tend to and look at on a regular basis to making sure that you're creating that line of sight so your big measures move. How do you support your leaders in pausing to look for bright spots so that we aren't thinking about what isn't working? We're really looking closely at what is working and why, and what can we learn from that as we're trying to spread those strategies across teams, and then growing the capacity for evidence-based leadership. So as we think today, and we shared this last week as well, one of the biggest impacts we can have on the success of our teams and organizations is to really making sure that we're growing deep leadership within every team. And when we think about leadership, we're really talking about a behavior. We have teachers who are leaders. We have support team members who are leaders. How do we build that deep leadership behavior at every level of the organization? And how do we help people see themselves as leaders as they're growing the capacity of their own team? For those of you who know us, we guide our work with foundational beliefs, 9 core principles that really drive the research around how do we lead together. Half of them relate to building strong team work, and half of them really relate to how do we drive execution to results. Together as a whole, every leader in an organization has to build the capability to lead with confidence in all 9 areas. And Dee Dee, I know you know this well. Some of the leaders that I've worked with have been really strong in culture building and needed to develop more of the strategy to execution. And some are really goal oriented and really needed to develop that deep connection to people. And together, over the course of a career, we need to build those capabilities in the teams. Any insights that you want to share, Dee Dee, as you're thinking about just building that view of it's not just culture and it's not just outcomes, but really those capabilities to build both?
Absolutely. High performing districts have to have a blend and a balance of each part of that. And I always think about something you've shared, and it's about knowing when to lean in, knowing when to pull back, and finding that natural balance with culture and strategy.
Nice, Dee Dee. Thanks for those insights. As we're thinking about the work of the team members and we think about, building the capability of your newest leaders to your teams, we center on people first. How do they get to know their team members? How do they let their team members get to know them as humans? So they aren't just viewing the principal as a job title or the director of facilities as a job title. They're really knowing them as individuals, and they know that the individuals are equally committed to getting to know their team members effectively. And then that commitment to service. How do we show up every day, really aligning our individual work behaviors so that we are living the core values that are important to the organization? We're demonstrating that commitment to care for one another, as well as the team, as the students, the families, and the communities we serve. And today we're really going to talk about how do we create that line of sight between strategy and execution and the results that matter most. Often, we'll have that sense of these indicators of results are really important, and we'll have an idea of the strategy and the way that we expect to execute it. We may have the right strategy and execute it in a weak way. We may be executing a strategy that isn't creating the leverage. So together, when we think about half of the work that we do is really building that strong commitment to people, that strong commitment to team. And the other part is really being intentionally looking at, is the strategy and the execution working for us for the results that matter most to us? When we think about that alignment, and we think about that, what's most important, new leaders will often look at superintendent saying, I've got to follow the superintendent. I've got to understand the direction of the board. What we're really trying to do is ground the fact that we really want to align our work to what's most important. What are those core beliefs? What are those core areas that really drive that level of commitment to ongoing improvement? And what are those skill development areas that are going to be timeless, those strategic priorities that are timeless? So it isn't about following Pat or Dee Dee, it's really following our core values as a team, so that when leaders change, that core mission, that core purpose stays, regardless of who's sitting in that seat. And we're building that capability of the team members to continue to lead toward those timeless strategic priorities, that commitment to student success, that commitment to team success, that commitment to really deep service to the communities. As we think about that strategy and that alignment and the execution, the left-hand side, affectionately, we have people coming to work every day, working really hard in the work that they do. And part of the challenge is without a clear sense of what are we trying to accomplish, they're working really hard in a bunch of different directions. as we build a set of core values, what are the work behaviors, it starts putting that black outline around the arrows so that people know, how do I show up for one another? What's most important in the values that we deliver? And as we get clear to the execution of the results that are most important, it helps people work with intention and really build that sense of commitment so that we're continuing to assess our work on, are we getting the impact that's most important to improve? Dee Dee, I know you worked really hard in your organization to create that sense of care and commitment. Anything else that you want to highlight as you're thinking about driving for that strategic impact?
I would just reiterate what you've already said. And as it applied to when I was superintendent, we would always say one team, one mission, one community. And it really was about showing up for one another and getting those arrows all headed in the same direction. And we had to make our mission that we all could verbalize and really stress the one team, that we were all in it together, and then it took everybody carrying their weight to show up for one another to move the needle for impact.
Yeah, nice, Dee Dee. Thanks for sharing those insights. I'm going to share a little bit about a story. I'm working closely with a team in Southern California, and it's a large system by standards in most states, 23,000 students roughly, and almost 89% of their students are children who struggle really with their families having access to those basic needs. When they think about the work that they're doing, this is a deeply committed team that's really focused on, how do we actually create that level of lift, and how do we get really clear on what's most important to improve? As we think about that core value, this is a team that got really tight with what is it that creates what they refer to as their basics. What are the basic human behaviors that we should all be demonstrating as we're working together in that level of the team? They also have really clear aspirations for what they want in the vision for their organization. As we think about, this is an area in Southern California that grows oranges. So that visualization, I want you to understand, this is something that's really important to their core community. So the roots that they're establishing is they're really committed to embracing, educating, and empowering every child. That sturdy base is, how are we living our core values, our basics together? And their strategic priorities are championing student success, cultivating high-performing teams, developing a strength of community confidence, and really building that ongoing commitment to service to the community, and that careful and responsible management of resources. As they identify the core strategies that they're going to be targeting, you can tell that those are actually the areas that are creating their annual goals. You're going to see those pop up as the leaves on the tree. The visualization is a powerful one to pull together the entire team, both support staff and certified staff, as they're working on their elements of improvement. The other part that was really powerful is they added, what are those tools and strategies that we're working on that right-hand side of the ledger of deepening two-way communication, really engaging the voices closest to the work, really identifying root cause to problem solving so that their challenges are solved for. How are they progress checking to make sure that they're making the improvements that they need? How do they actually make sure that they're recognizing what right looks like, building those problem-solving processes around key challenges, and really doing those deeper problem-solving team work as they're trying to get to the root cause of some of the challenges that they're focused on. It's a nice visualization of pulling together both the work they're doing as leaders to problem solve together, and really that strategic aim that they're trying to target. So as we're focusing on that work together as a team and we think about measures that matter most, one of the areas that they're targeting is student safety. And when we think about student behavior and student safety, the lagging indicator is suspensions. So as they think about the work of the team, they're really trying to get underneath how can we be more preventative as opposed to waiting until a child is suspended. As you look at that, they're looking at the number of incidences of suspension. They're looking at their literacy target as a key priority. They're looking at students who are chronically absent and the level of expulsion within the organization. This is a big system with a lot of students. And as they're looking at that goal setting, not only are they setting the goal for the year, they're setting their targets month over month. So they're actually identifying the little measures that they should be looking at as they're looking at that progress every 4 weeks so that they can make sure they're tending to that level of target and care in the work that they're doing. I'm going to jump into, so we've talked about what are those key priorities, what are the strategies that they're looking at, and Dee Dee, they're looking at the strategic bullseye as the center of the bullseye. That's their vision and mission. How are we going to accomplish this over time? As they're looking at that areas that they're intending to hardwire, I'm going to focus on the daily huddle and logging for data and how they're doing that line of sight to gratitude. But their daily huddle actually started a year and a half ago in that outer ring of experiment and explore. They were struggling with their middle school suspension rate. They worked as an executive team with just their middle school leaders to see would that daily huddle make a difference in meeting with their middle school leaders to take a look at daily aggression of their students. It was so successful as a bright spot. Last year, they moved it into how do they test the scale. And this year they're using it as this is a work behavior that they're hardwiring across the entire system. I'm going to share with you a little bit of the results that they're finding as they've moved into that strategy to execution. As they looked at their daily huddle, they were really trying to identify, and what they learned from the middle school is what were the roadblocks that were being caused, what were the challenges that they were experiencing day over day with student behavior, and where were those occurring. So as they looked at what was the feedback that they were getting, what were the challenges that they needed to solve for, and we know that suspension, expulsion was the key target of the outcome that they were intending to improve. As we looked at that, the daily huddle, logging for data, well, suspension actually is a lagging indicator because you're actually doing it after a critical incident and after a period of time where you've got notifications of students. So as they looked at their logging for data, they were looking for daily incidences of daily aggression. Where was it happening? What was the cause of it? How might they be able to prevent it with adult supervision? And how do they actually get underneath the students that are falling into a pattern of behavior so that they aren't becoming students who are suspended? And also taking a look at how can they create that line of sight to the support team members who are really making a difference in that frontline care with students and that frontline prevention of incidences, and really making sure that we're being intentional about that. They looked at day over day, the expectation of the number of incidences, but in their daily log, it was really the incidences of aggression day over day that they were expecting their team members to provide support for. So as they moved into those daily huddles, their intention was to provide that daily care for their sites, their students, and their team members, And that daily conversation around how can we problem solve alongside the site leaders. Every principal was to log the data every night of the number of student behavioral incidences that day. They did it in a Google Doc. And part of those always actions is it needed to be the principal so that they were pausing to do the assessment of where are the incidences happening? How do we actually think about the supervision that we have set up? And then the next morning, the entire team joined for a 15-minute check-in from 7:45 in the morning to 8 o'clock. This included all of the executive leaders and all of their building principals, their assistant principals, and any of the key team members that were needed for part of that behavior. And they really focused on the systems related to student safety and student behavior. As they looked at that one strategy with that hardwired execution reduced suspension rates by 70%, improved the overall district suspension rate by 23%. They had 1,155 more days of instruction with the children because they weren't missing school. And they saved nearly $100,000 worth of funding because the students' attendance improved. And this was really that hardwired 15-minute habit and making sure that the team was together and aligned. As we think about that visible daily, the visible data, keeping it out in front of the people so that they could make really strong decisions, the routines of using the data for improvement, and really that care and support for the team members so that they could do that work. So when we think about how do we actually build that line of sight from those key priorities to really the little data that they're trying to move in order to lift that level of performance. As we think about those strategic aims, the goals, the scorecard, what are those measures that matter most, really aligning it to school and department goals, having teams of teachers in their PLCs think about what will that look like, sound like, feel like, as we're talking about the short measures, your quick quizzes in literacy, your quick quizzes in math, what they're seeing with student behaviors and being able to lift that classroom to classroom, and then doing individual goal setting with the students as they're working on that over time. As we think about that level of alignment within Hemet, I shared a really specific example regarding that strategy to execution regarding their daily huddles. Now they're creating that line of sight around their literacy goal, their student attendance goal, and really keeping that priority out in front of them in that continued focus on student safety and reducing that level of suspension. So that line of sight is really going from that strategic aim, that strategic priority, those big measures, all the way down to those little measures that they're going to be tracking school by school and classroom by classroom. So as we think about that evidence-based leadership framework and that work that we're doing, we're working with principals to build that capability around the 9 principles. How do we build that level of support to the individual leaders so that they feel confident in building strong culture and strong strategy to execution? The part I've always appreciated with the evidence-based leadership framework is it creates a visual around that strategy to execution. How do we get really clear on the measures that are going to matter most? How do we align that deep level of development around the skills and the capabilities in order to be successful in literacy, in making sure that team members know that line of sight, in that level of how do we build great culture, and then how do we create those hardwired always actions? I shared with you on Hemet's, their always action was really that commitment to the daily huddle, and then their feedback came aligned to making sure that principals were reporting every day where that level of daily aggression was. They were looking for the bright spots within individual buildings on what were they noticing as they were shifting staffing, as they were doing that preventative conversations with students. And then they had the ability to say, are we allocating our people, our time, our talent, and our resources in a really powerful way? They're creating breakthrough results because they really got tight in those foundations, the aligned goals, the aligned work behaviors, and now looking for those bright spots to that strategy and execution is getting really clear, not just in their suspension data, but building those capabilities of the whole team to now tackle literacy, what they're going to be doing with attendance, and the areas that they're working on operationally as well. I've always loved this framework, and Dee Dee, I know you and I have worked alongside for a long time. Any other insights that you'd want to raise as you're thinking about that strategy to execution with the evidence-based leadership framework?
Well, it's just such a powerful story. And I love the fact that they have built a process that they can now use with other challenges and barriers that they're facing. What really spoke to me through the graphic was how they were able to blur the lines from the classroom to the community, and how there's going to be great improvement because they have put an emphasis, and especially using those huddles to be very timely and intentional with their actions. And it's going to have a big impact for their entire community.
Yeah, it sure will, Dee Dee. And it's impacting. Children are safer. Children are learning more because they're in school. The leadership is getting really tight in understanding the actions that are really creating a significant impact for them. And we're able to really think about even operationally. I'm working with teams that they're really trying to improve hiring. They're trying to improve, their payroll process. This framework for execution works, whether it's operationally or instructionally or behaviorally. It works every time as you're really getting tight with what are your priorities, how do you align that learning, and how are we going to be really committed to identifying what should be tight in our follow through, and then what should we be looking for as those bright spots. As we think about that level of commitment and care as we're doing that planning, and we know that every team has school plans, every department has priority plans. The biggest shift is how do we stop looking at them in a grand way and really looking at them in the next 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 5 days, the next day. What are those key priorities that we're going to be looking for? And what's that data that we're going to be collecting, the little data that aligns to that lagging data that we're really trying to drive? So Dee Dee, as they're looking at it, they're really thinking about 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks. The other part that I highlighted, and I just wanted to highlight that so that we're keeping that line of sight tight. They're looking at new employee onboarding every Wednesday afternoon. This is a big system that's regularly adding new team members week over week. They're not looking at it as an event in August. They're really creating that line of sight to how are they keeping that engine of onboarding their new team members to their values, to their goals, and really keeping that key priority out in front of people. And then how are they looking at that follow through from every team member day over day, week over week, as they're looking for, are they on track with what they're saying is most important to improve? I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation, Dee Dee, on Wednesday as we're thinking about just an open dialogue. So team members that are joining us today, colleagues, pop your questions in the chat. We also have a feedback loop. We're going to be guiding what we ask and answer based on the feedback that you have. Dee Dee and I and Dr. Mendoza is going to be joining us on Wednesday. Really looking forward to having the conversation together with you. And we also invite you to join us in October as we're looking for what's right in education. This is an event per year where executive team leaders will share, exactly like I highlighted with Hemet, what are the strategies that they're really learning or creating lift, and what are they learning in that process of improvement as they're moving from goals to execution and really creating that line of sight in their systems. So it's always a pleasure, Dee Dee. It's been a gift to spend the time with you today. I look forward to spending it again on Wednesday and look forward to seeing everybody with us on Wednesday and really honor the hard work that you're doing as you're preparing for your school years and building the capability of the leaders closest to the work. Thank you. Dee Dee, thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Always a pleasure.